Welcome to another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. My name is Molly McGrath, and I am the creator of this office altering podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. As always, you can check us out at hiringandempowering.com. All right, let's hit it. Let's talk today about our conversation. As you all know, I am a huge fan of results, analytics, data, and really empowering your team by and large, your marketing coordinator and your client service coordinator that are at the front of the house. And we're always speaking about KPI. So today's conversation, results-driven data literacy. And I'm so excited to have Matt Cowell here with us as our guest. Welcome, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about you, your company, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Sure. Yeah, my background is in kind of product and tech, and so have always also been a big fan of data, as you are. And I'm CEO of a company called Quanthub, and we have a data literacy upskilling platform. And so organizations, enterprises will use our platform to help really establish data skills and a data-driven culture across the entire enterprise, it's a pretty big deal in this day and age when we're just surrounded by data. And so that's a little bit about what we do.
And we'll have in the show notes all the goodies in regards to how to connect with Matt directly, in addition to their website, so you can check it out. Let's dive in and tell us a little bit about your passion. And, first and foremost, I don't want people to brown out. Yeah, I think you know this. Our ideal listener are law firm owners, by and large. Small boutique law firm owners and their employees, whether it be a CEO, COO, and or really just a client service coordinator, somebody's at the front of the house, as we all know. That's the most important position in any business because they're the ones who are the data kings or queens, if you will. And, I have to say, two things. One, listeners, it doesn't matter what CRM you are using. If you're using Practice Panther, Clio, Action Step, what have you, this conversation will be relevant to you. This is not about your CRM. It is 100% about gaining literacy in regards to results-driven data in your firm. And COVID's been really beautiful for our law firms because in the past, when we were working, most of our firms were brick and mortar, not necessarily online and communicating online. A lot of law firms have absolutely blown up in a positive way in regards to people having awareness. Most of our listeners are estate planning and elder law firms. And many of them in the past just really let their calendar dictate the analytics and the data, what have you. And now there's awareness, appreciation, and understanding. However, the flip side of that, a tremendous amount of overwhelming confusion in regards to data and analytics and why knowing your numbers is so critical and important and what numbers to know. So I'd love for you to just kind of kick us off in regards to the need for knowing your numbers and the data, so to speak, and then speaking into additionally how to get your team and the people that are responsible for managing the data to get proficient in understanding the importance and what it means about results-driven data.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to say that data literacy is a sort of every company in the world, every employee of the world problem, where there's just a big gap in data skills. And this is we're not talking about data scientists and data engineers. This is not about the high tech part of the workforce. I mean, there are skill gaps there as well. And that's a different conversation. But here, you talked about the front house sort of client services people and using CRMs. And so if you're going to do some analysis of, let's say, where cases are coming from, ideal customer, success rates in cases, and these types of things, you're starting to look at these metrics. Where does that data come from? it oftentimes comes actually from people entering it into the CRM. And so if those people aren't necessarily data literate, they're not thinking about the analysis that's going to happen from someone downstream. So to pull those KPIs, to see how we're trending against those KPIs. And so for a person in client service, if they're just entering in default values when they're filling out data in the CRM, they're missing on key components of that data that someone may want to look at in the future. And so that's just one example of where those front of the house sort of folks need to understand data literacy. They need to understand data quality. They need to understand their role in it, what types of analysis might be done based on that data, so they understand how important it is. And that's just one example. That's actually more on the creation of data. When you're looking at KPIs, what about looking at different ways to chart your trends against those KPIs? Are you successful against those KPIs? Are you projecting out to the end of the quarter, let's say, and believing that you're going to hit those KPIs? Well, what kind of chart is actually the best chart to use? And so these are just a couple examples of skills that we all need. These are not just skills for analytics professionals. Understanding charts, understanding different types of data, how you might use that data, a little bit around data quality. These are skills that we all need, not just the sort of professional analytics segment of the employee base.
You said something really key in regards to forecasting, and I think that's where a lot of law firms miss the mark a little bit. And in regards to, so often I'll hear for the firms that I manage when I get on their weekly team meetings or weekly marketing meetings,
right.
I look at their dashboards and there are so many holes in it, and not to shame or blame anyone, but I'll hear time and time and time again from the team, from the employees saying, I don't know where true north is. I don't know what the formula for success is.
Right.
And to the entrepreneur, the attorney's defense, they don't either. Of how do I set up that formula for success and use the term forecasting? So how many leads do we need to get on a weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis in order to reach our goal, and then taking in the conversion rates from a lead? I would love for you to speak into what you see when you start working with clients that don't have awareness around this and or don't have the numbers. And in my experience, people are typically embarrassed when, especially if you own the business, you're like, I feel so stupid that I don't know my numbers and I'm a business owner.
Well, I think in my experience, where that comes from is oftentimes people think that to get those numbers, they have to be highly technical and they have to have a highly technical staff. And they're like, I don't have the budget to hire analytics people to get those numbers for me. And that's just not the case. It doesn't have to be that technical to pull these numbers together and start figuring out, like you said, how many leads do you have coming in a week? And then looking at conversion rates, and now what your sales are going to be. And those are relatively simple exercises, but people don't necessarily know where to start. And so when you think of data literacy, again, we're not talking about highly technical skills. The way I like to think about it is just start asking questions, be inquisitive of what's going on in the firm. And so in that particular case, the owner of the firm is, like you said, embarrassed. They don't know their data. And so pick one thing: marketing, leads, that's a thing. And just pick that and start asking questions. Asking questions where your leads are coming from. How many leads are you getting? On what period of time? How many of those are converting? Those are a couple relatively simple questions to answer. You may not be able to answer them right this second, but then that's the conversation to have with your staff and say, let's answer these questions with data. And so then people actually start realizing, okay, well, we're not tracking leads. They're coming in, but we're not keeping up with them and counting them. Simple as that. And we're not actually capturing the date when they came in. So we can't trend them over time. Okay, well, let's change that. So let's start tracking when the leads came in, and let's start getting some sort of way, whether maybe we're not even using a CRM yet if it's a small firm. And so let's start using something, spreadsheet, anything, to start tracking these things. And now all of a sudden we're answering questions with data. And that enables us to ask additional questions. Okay, so we're getting 20 leads a week, 80 leads a month, and none of them are converting. What's going on? Well, now let's actually look at where those leads go after that. And so starting to look at leads in particular phases of the process and where they're falling out. And so it just comes with being inquisitive and asking questions as to what's going on in particular circumstances. In this example's marketing, and then answering those questions with data. And that doesn't take, in this particular case, that doesn't take doing highly complicated analytical analyses, right? It's just as simple as making sure you have the data and then look at the data, and that will enable you to continue to sort of up your game from a data literacy perspective.
I really appreciate you saying maybe you don't even have a CRM. Number one, let's start with spreadsheets. Mm-hmm. So I hear that takes a lot of pressure off if people don't have the data in, or a robust CRM, for a lack of a better term, that even starting with the spreadsheets. Number two, what I love that you said, two things I heard, asking the powerful questions. And then number two, getting deeply curious about it when you start diving into it. And I think, that's what I'm hearing from you, is that's how you get that literacy. Is that something you help people with, of just hopping on a call with you and knowing the powerful questions to ask them and giving them that framework to start gathering what information they need to get that results-driven data?
So yeah, during a sales process for us with our solution is an upskilling platform, but obviously we want to be consultative in a process where we get to know people and understand what they're trying to do. So yeah, I love talking about this topic in general. So certainly, we want that to be as consultative as possible. And then the way we think about it is when you start actually getting a greater data literacy skill level across the entire organization, and then people start asking those questions, which it becomes habitual. And then so you don't just start answering questions off the cuff if you don't have anything to back it up. So you're like, well, man, I don't actually know. Let me go take a look. And then you start actually pulling data together, and you become more data driven, just because it becomes habitual to ask good questions and then answer those questions with data. Doesn't mean you have to have all the data to be 100% for certain. There's a diminishing returns, if you will, in some cases. But seeking out the answer to those questions through data, it becomes part of the culture, and that's a transformation that takes time. And asking those questions is part of it, and then also getting a proficiency across the staff in just sort of general data skills, and not highly complex, but understanding chart types, understanding different types of data, how might data be used? Because if you don't realize how data is often used, you may not realize how to answer these questions. And so there's some base skills that are good to get across the firm as well.
And yes, and it becomes habitual, because once you hear something, you can't unhear it. And now you have it in your craw, and you can start when you're in. And what I love that you said too, is that you're given permission for the employee, the employer, whoever is starting to go on this mining adventure, so to speak, to say, you know what? I don't know the answer right now, but let me go and look for it. And then each week, one small step at a time, coming back with the data. And when you involve all the employees, you involve the entire firm in it, I can imagine just by having the awareness and having the powerful question, as you start to build things, to your point, it takes time, but you have to be seeing some really amazing results just during this data mining process, huh?
Yeah, well, the ultimate goal of this type of transformation is that with law firms, the owner is not the one that even has to ask the questions. It may start there, particularly if you're not very data driven. Certainly that's a good place to start. And because it starts forming habits across the entire organization. But the ideal place is that the owner doesn't even have to ask those questions. It becomes layers down in the organization where they are now asking those questions, because that's just how the organization operates. And now everyone's asking these questions and answering these questions with the data that they have available. And then the efficiency and operations of the organization just continues to rise, because everyone is starting to become inquisitive as to why things are happening. And they're now able to figure out why, and then they make small course corrections to, in pursuit of, well, we might be able to do that better if we change this or if we change this. And so that's where that really feeds into people taking action every day. The best way to improve efficiency or operations of an organization is to get the entire employee base context as to what you're trying to do, and have everyone pulling on that thread, right? And then you really can make a difference.
Yeah. So often I'll hear two things from business owners. Is number one, that my employees don't care, around metrics and analytics, all that. But you just said something very powerful. That's number one. And number two, what I hear so often is that everybody's looking up to me to give the framework, to give the formula for success, so to speak, and always waiting on the business owner. And I love what you just said, is that I'm always preaching this. They care more than your employees do. They just don't know what to care about in regards to metrics in the business side of things. So you're given the framework, and this, once you involve everybody in it, it creates such freedom from the entrepreneur or the manager, C-level suite, whatever position you're sitting in, to consistently having to provide that framework, for a lack of a better term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I was looking at your website earlier, and you have the 66-day law firm turnaround, and your very first activity is the KPI discovery. And I think what's interesting about where we're talking right now, or where we're discussing this right now, is that you may have KPIs at the top level of the entire firm, but if you think about KPIs, and you really want that to be something that the entire organization is bought into, then the top level of the firm has KPIs, and those are probably pretty high level about the firm's overall success. But let's actually get KPIs deeper into the organization in a way where they're contributing to part of the organization's success. So if you take the marketing example further, why is the conversion rate what it is? Do we want to? Should we actually be focused on improving the conversion rate, or should we be focused on top of the funnel? We want to get more leads in. And so these are different types of KPIs that might be specific to marketing. And then that's where you start getting everyone involved. And the sum of those KPIs across the entire organization hopefully then leads up to the top level KPIs that measure the entire firm's success.
Yeah. And one of the things I'm so excited that you do within your organization is something that is near and dear to my heart, which is hiring and staffing. Mm-hmm. And the number one question I get from people in regards to who to hire and when to hire that person. So can you talk to us? Because so often it'll be an emotional decision when I talk to people. Okay, tell me about what do you want my help with in regards to hiring? And most recruiters would just take the business owner's answer at face value. And what I really do is a deep dive to really make certain that that's the direct. But again, I'm only going off of what they're telling me. Talk to us a little bit about the data that you can provide for business owners in regards to who their next hire is.
Yeah. And so another aspect of our business, and this probably isn't something that law firms would look at, but we do assessments of technical skills in an interview process. And so we assess for data science skills, so this is the highly technical side of it. And, there are a lot of assessment platforms out there that assess different types of skills, maybe more job fits, that not personality based, but some of the softer skills and maybe just general problem solving, this type of thing. And, if you want to be data driven in a hiring process, then there are great tools out there to assess some of these things. as opposed to, we get in a conversation with a candidate and we're inevitably going to be biased in that conversation, based on a lot of different characteristics.
Sure.
Maybe they're from where we're from, and all of a sudden we start out the interview with a positive sense about this person just simply because they're from near St. Louis, where I'm from. And so, it's subtle things like that. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person for having that. It's just human nature that you're going to have that. And so being able to use some of the tools that are out there to be more objective in that process can really help. And that one of the things that I found to be really interesting as we've hired salespeople is, we have a pretty good idea. Our chief revenue officer has a pretty good idea of what, you have those DISC profiles or Myers-Briggs, or I forget the one that she likes to use. Enneagram, I think, is what it is that she likes to use. And so she has a pretty good idea of who her best salespeople always have been in terms of their Enneagram profile. And so that's an example of using data in the hiring process. And in some of those things, you can actually, if you're not careful and you don't think about it from a bias perspective, you can actually introduce bias by using some of those things that aren't tested in a hiring process. But a lot of those have been tested. A lot of those tools and techniques to assess different aspects of a person's likely performance, a lot of those have actually been tested for bias, and they're fine. And so using that enables you to have a more data-driven hiring process. You probably wouldn't use Quanthub because you're probably not hiring data scientists, but that's okay.
Some firms might be at the point that they're in, but yeah. So tell us a little bit about your data literacy assessment that you do have out there.
Yeah, so we have assessments on data literacy where we're assessing, a general understanding of potential use cases for data. Again, it gives people context of when they see scenarios like even, my Alexa device is in the next room, right? That's a use case for data. What I'm speaking right now is in fact data for that device, right? In the data you're entering into the CRM systems about clients, that's data that can be used downstream. And so recognizing these sort of scenarios where you would actually use data is important early on in becoming more data literate, because you start recognizing the data around you. You don't realize it. You don't sort of pay attention to that as data. And so that understanding different types of data, you have demographic data, you have behavioral data, psychographic data, these types of data types. This information is good for people to start getting some context as to what it means to use data, and even recognizing how data might be used. Like I said, different types of data, different chart types, not highly technical things, just kind of beginning with that. And so we have assessments that, assess on those different topics. And then we have kind of a general upskilling program that is designed to be something that you fit into the white space of your day, like in 10 to 15 minutes a day. So if you think about the language learning platforms like Duolingo, they're all sort of microlearning is what it's called. They're all 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, helping you learn continuously. And that's exactly what our platform is like for data skills.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. We talk a lot about some of this behavioral and getting the data in regards to, people are always talking about how you can think something and you show up on Facebook and there you have it. You have an ad for and then Alexa and what have you. Do you all get into a lot of that type of data as well?
Yeah. Those are definitely use cases of data. We do have highly technical content as well that people can get into how that actually works. That's not for everyone. And so our platform leverages assessments so that you always know where your skill is. And then that way you're seeing appropriate content. One of the problems with learning platforms in general, and that have nothing to do with Quanthub, is that oftentimes they're one size fits all. And so everyone goes through the same program. And it's just highly inefficient. And honestly, they're either overwhelmed or they're bored. And in either case, they're not learning. And so something that's tailored directly to you is going to be more effective. And that's exactly the way we work, because we have assessment questions, not like big long tests, but just assessment questions just simply embedded into that process. So we're always measuring your skills and always keeping everything appropriate to your skill level.
I love that. They're either overwhelmed or bored. This is really, I mean, you just nailed it with that in regards to even just, again, data. When a lot of our attorneys will do webinars, they'll do from a sales perspective, a tremendous amount of training. And so often their mindset is, oh, they were crappy leads. They didn't convert, what have you. But yeah. I love, especially as attorneys, sometimes I always say a confused mind says no. But I like how you really laid this out, overwhelmed or bored. Can you speak a little bit into that? I love that comment.
Well, I think it's when people are training or something, if they're not meeting, we're all in a different place on our learning journey, right? And it doesn't matter if we're learning something that's just kind of a core concept and it's sort of an educational training, or we're learning about a client, or we're learning about, we're learning every day, and we're all at a different place in that journey, because we're all individuals and our skill sets are different and our mindsets are different. And so oftentimes when we're in training or we're in that type of situation, it's not tailored to the individual, it's tailored to the group. And the group is full of lots of personalities, lots of different skill levels. And so it's just a really inefficient way to do it, because everyone receives the same material. Everyone receives the same training. And, some people don't need that. They only need the last half of it. But the problem is they've been so bored by the first half that they never catch the last half. The other people are overwhelmed by a lot of it. And so they're so overwhelmed, they don't catch the parts that they should catch. And so neither one of those situations are good. And it's only good for a small segment in the middle, where they're not overwhelmed and they're not bored. But it might be a small segment of it. And so there are better ways to do it, frankly. And that's by just making sure that you're able to tailor that learning journey down to the individual and really base it on where they are specifically, not in some just kind of generalized manner.
I love that you keep using this terminology, the learning journey. And then I think you said earlier with your 15 minutes that you have would you call them mini?
Yeah, it's microlearning, right? So it's learning in very small pieces. Yeah.
Yes, I love that as a concept. And I'm sure you've tested it.
Yeah, we didn't come up with that. So that honestly, what's really funny is there's research around that technique and the way we learn that's been around since the 1940s. But then higher education and just sort of our culture around education has been the opposite, where we learn in long courses. We learn one subject at a time. We learn, test, forget. And so they're just, we know why that is. Not we at Quanthub, like we in this industry know why that is. But it's only more recently that we've really started to see a lot of a shift, if you will, in learning methodology and how people are approaching learning to be more small, to fit into something that someone can fit into their day, and then help them remember it by covering it again tomorrow. Make sure they don't forget it. So just some of these different techniques.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. Wow. We could do a whole podcast just on that.
That's right. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, number one, if you could give some, in your experience, tips or drive-by coaching in regards to how to embrace and what you would enroll your employees in regards to getting really deeply curious and excited about results-driven data literacy. And then number two, just let us know how we can connect with you.
Yeah, and I think I like the way you guys start your turnaround program. Like I said, with the KPI discovery, I like starting it there, as you kind of have you start with sort of shared goals, and they're very data-driven goals. And so I like that type of thought process where Maybe the KPIs are in support of a broader goal of, you might have a mission or something that's not so numbers driven, but you have KPIs to support that. You want to expand into this territory or expand into this market, and then you have data driven KPIs to support that. And so I like the idea of approaching it that way, and then as you start becoming more data oriented in that way, you start setting targets, you start expecting the organization to answer questions with data, and then you start filling in data skills so that people can do so. And that's really where we fit, right? We can help with that upfront, and the types of conversations that should happen, because this is a human transformation. It's not just around them building their skills. It's around the whole organization thinking a little bit differently. And so, yeah, we can have those conversations early on and then start getting people enrolled in an upskilling program. The best way to contact us, obviously, you can go to our, like any company, we have a website and there's plenty of calls to action on the website. But happy to have people email me personally. Would love to. I'm passionate about this topic, so I'd love to talk to anyone that is is thinking about going down this journey or is in the middle of it. My email is matt@quanthub.com. I'm the CEO, so happy to talk to anyone about this, about the journey they're on.
Yeah, I love what you just said in closing. It's about the human transformation, because I would assert for the employee of, that might not be in a financial position or IT position, and what's in it for me to really care about this data and or the results. But I love that framework and that mind shift of it's a human transformation. That's, in my experience, a great way. Once you get deeply curious and you start building the habits of speaking and communicating in data versus emotions. I talk about this all the time, facts without emotion.
Right.
And really, that's an opportunity for you to communicate your value in the company. For an employee, it's a wonderful way to really consistently communicating your leveling up and being able to replace yourself in your current position. And when you speak in results-driven data, having the opportunity to grow in your position, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the future. There's no getting around it. There is a transformation happening in the corporate world where it's not optional. It's not going to be optional for much longer to have data skills in the modern workforce. And so it's not time to say that's somebody else's job, because that's just not the reality anymore. It's like that. It's like in the 1990s when computers came around. A lot of people were resistant to start using them, but then it just became how we work. You can't work without a computer, and we're headed down that same path here with data. Like you can't work much longer without data and being comfortable with data, and not highly technical, but just being able to use data to back up, what you're doing and the decisions you're making.
Yeah, I can't help but just say this because I think it's so important. As you said, I never really thought of it until you just said that. We're not going back, and this is going to be the way to only communicate going forward. And the firms that I work with that finally understand key performance indicators, finally get through the heartache and the headache of garbage in, garbage out, getting their data and setting up their fields and all that. It's a lot of work, and it can be frustrating in the beginning, especially when your reporting has holes in it or missing information, what have you. But once you get through that part of it, it's really exciting for me when even just a receptionist shows up on our calls and she's like, okay, let's talk about reporting. And there's no more conversation. And this is what I hear from entrepreneurs. I hate meetings. I don't like going every week because it's just a coffee clutch. It's a conversation. It's not helpful for me as a business owner. But when you can get everyone right down to the receptionist, they get so excited. Like they're so happy when the reporting actually has information on there and data. And in my experience, it really, like you said, it's a human transformation because there's no more finger pointing. There's no more blame or employee drama and things of that nature when everybody is crystal clear on the data that they're tracking for their roles and their position and the seat they sit on the bus. I mean, I would love to get your insight on this and what you see in regards to just the office dynamic and the culture.
Yeah, one thing that I just thought of as you were talking is oftentimes people try to then just pull everything they can pull, all this data into every aspect of what's happening, and you can quickly you quickly get lost in the data when really you're trying to. I just keep going back to this concept of you're trying to answer questions. And that comes through finding the insight in the data, not just the data itself. Data itself is not all that valuable. It's the insights that come out of the data, and that's where the value is. And so again, if you're trying to answer a question as to why are we getting more leads this month than last month, or why are we getting fewer leads this month than last month, or why are fewer converting, those are insights. You're going to figure out in the data why this is happening or what the trends are that might give you some clue as to why that's happening. That's what you're trying to answer. And now that's insightful, right? That's something that you might take action on. Just simply reporting it, you can report on a lot of different things. And that's where people get glazed, their eyes glaze over. You're really looking for those insights. And so I think when I see organizations do this effectively, they're not just dumping out spreadsheets and charts that they're actually showing you that detail, but then they're overlaying it with, and this is the insight. It's down because of this, and that's, they dug into the data, they figured it out. And then when they get into that executive meeting where you're reviewing KPIs, the KPI is that we hit it, we missed it, and so on. And it was because of this or these three things. And we need to dig further and figure out exactly what. But that's where you start having really meaningful conversations that can lead to actions to continue to improve.
Finding the insight in the data. That's exciting, because a lot of times people think the data, the reporting is going to be used as a weapon against them, so to speak. If the numbers don't show that we didn't convert X, Y, and Z, but if you could shift it on just even 2 millimeters to getting excited, like you said, it's insightful. And so then you have the answers, then you have the data, then you have the information, then you can make informed decisions.
Right. Well, that's a great point. Culturally, if you're a culture of the sort of 5 whys, and the whole organization is accustomed to doing that, then and it becomes about taking action to improve, then you get away from that. You get away a little bit from that culture of this data is weaponized, if you will, because it's all about finding the truth and then taking action to improve based on that truth. And so if that can be the focus, then you really eliminate a lot of that fear. And it's not that there's not accountability, there should be, but where you run into problems is when people keep seeing the same thing and they're not doing anything about it. That's where I think accountability falls, where it's obvious there should be some accountability. If it's the first time this happened and you really learned something from it, and it's something that you're going to use to improve in the future, that's a great thing, because you're not always going to get predictable results. But when you learn something from your results and you take action and you improve it in the future, those are the kind of employees that I would want to have.
Yes, absolutely. Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Oh, well, this has been amazing. I love the conversation around the human transformation. I love the conversation around very much just the micro learning and the learning journey, and really looking at that people are either overwhelmed or they're bored, right, in addition to really just getting this insightful. And that's a word that's sticking out in closing for today. That's sticking out for me, because when you can get insightful and deeply curious, and then you start knowing the powerful questions to ask, I don't know, for me, it takes all the heavy and hard out of, because people freak out about data. They freak out about technology and what have you, and feel like, especially if you're a smaller business, what have you. But this almost feels like a fun exercise, so to speak, where you can treat it like a think tank.
Yeah.
And just, again, I love that word that you have. It's just about gaining the insight every step, every week, that you keep unpacking this entire deployment of getting the results-driven data. And that's how you gain your literacy.
Yeah, I totally agree. And start somewhere. You're not going to ask the perfect question on the first day. Ask a question and start digging into that. And from that, you'll probably think of other questions based on what you get back in response. And then eventually you'll land there. And, it's a process, and you'll probably never stop that process. And that's okay.
No.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. That means you're on a path of growth.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. Just ask one question. And then when you have the consistency and the persistency each week, and making sure you're putting it in your weekly team meetings, in your weekly reporting and looking at it, that's how you gain that strengthen that muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
All right, Matt. Well, thank you. I think this is a phenomenal stopping point, and we're going to have all of the links within. I highly recommend that you all go to the website and take the data literacy test and test your skills there, and reach out to Matt personally. I'll go ahead and put a link for your personal email in there, in addition to for Quanthub, your website. And like Matt said, there's no shortage of resources on your website. It's absolutely beautiful and very, very helpful.
Great. Well, Molly, I appreciate you having me.
Indeed. Okay. Until next time, this has been an episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions.
If you like what you hear on our podcast, please feel free to visit our website at hiringandempoweringsolutions.com. So we love that you are listening to this podcast. Please drop us a line with any feedback, suggested topics you'd like to hear. And absolutely, we'd love to hear about your victories and your win in regards to creating entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur's world.